Hello, I'm Steve Spatucci. I'm the author of Breach Point, and I'm also the book's cover designer and illustrator. And I thought it would be interesting to go on a tour of how the cover was created so you could see just how it was put together. So it all starts with this sketch, and if you look at this sketch, you can probably tell that it was initially done with pencil on a little 3x5 post-it note. So the sketch itself is about 3x3 inches, which is great because when you're sketching small, you can't allow yourself to get very detailed. So when I did this sketch, I had begun writing the book, but I wasn't consciously trying to draw Clara. In fact, I had a whole different cover design set up, a whole different cover concept set up. And so when I started drawing this, as I've done for many years, it's just a subconscious thing coming through, just the character's face. And really only when I was almost done, and it probably took less than 10 minutes, did I think this is Clara and this might make a great book cover. So without fully committing, I took it to the next step. I scanned in the sketch and I began inking it, and I inked it physically, meaning I used a brush tip black marker on Bristol board, 11 by 17, so pretty large paper. And I just went over the line work and I tried to define all the areas, but I didn't fill anything in with black or try to indicate any shading because I knew I'd be coloring the piece digitally. So there's Clara, and you can see just a fairly bold but delicate outline. And the next step was to take it into Photoshop. So I scanned that piece and I applied flat color. This image actually looks like a combination of a little bit of highlighting in the hair, but mostly you're seeing the flat base color of her skin, her lips, her eyes, and her hair. And I also changed the outline to dark red or brownish red just to set it off from the background because I knew that would be mostly black. And I didn't want to lose the outline in that. And in the next step, you can see that I have applied some highlights to the face, fairly soft highlights to the face and to the chest. And you can also see I didn't really worry too much about the bottom of her figure because I knew I'd be covering it up with something, most likely flames. And if you go back, you can probably tell that I altered her eyes because I thought that they looked too far apart and too small in the previous piece. I didn't want her to be a predator or anything. So now you have a little bit of depth with the highlight, and in the next phase I added more highlights. So now we have a real indication of light coming from the sides and below on her hair. It's probably not a totally realistic light, especially because she's surrounded by flames, but I wasn't going for total realism. I wanted something that looked interesting and maybe a little surreal. And then to get more depth, I created a shadow around the edge of her face and head. So you can see I actually created a layer in Photoshop that was filled with black, and I covered her up completely and then erased a lot of the center to bring focus to her face. So now she's starting to come out and she's starting to look more realistic. The next phase was to add a color cast, and this is to get some of the effect of real lighting around her. Obviously, eventually flames are added, so I wanted something red, but you can also see that I created a dark red or almost a brownish red around the edge of her face, and again I erased more toward the center in a soft way to give more focus to her face and to bring more of that brownish red to the edge of her head. And then I added the flames, and I initially thought that I'd be adding these by either creating a photo of flames myself or by purchasing a stock photo. And I tried that, and using a stock photo of flames in combination with the illustration, especially a not totally realistically rendered illustration. I mean, she has outline, so it's not going to be realistic. It just didn't work for me. So I created these flames by hand, and these probably took longer to get the way I wanted them than the rest of illustrating Clara. I had to get a naturalistic movement. I wanted things pointing upward. If you look at these, you probably can't tell on the completed cover, but there's an angle upward and in, there's a blur going on, and there's also a bit of magenta happening toward the bottom because I wanted some kind of a relief color. I didn't want the entire color scheme to be yellow, orange, and red and black. So just to soften it up a little bit and to vary it, I added magenta down there in the flames, not as apparent on the final cover. And I added the flame layer on top of Clara. It's completely on top of her, softened it up a bit. And then you have the final image. Now I will point out that even though you're seeing this cover creation in a pretty clean sequence, I'm sure I did this I created this cover over a year ago, and I'm sure I went back and forth many times. It probably took about 30 hours to create, and even after it was created, I had to add the design elements of the logo, the subtitle, and my author name in that black bar. So there was a lot of variation going on. I didn't want the black bar to come too close to her neck or it would be an awkward composition, so I varied the size of Clara and the flames many times to get it right. And if you see any other versions, you'll be able to see that every e-reader has a slightly different cover size. So in many cases, the subtitle is moved down or is gone completely, and my name might be up. So every one of those elements is a separate layer in Photoshop or in some cases Adobe Illustrator, just trying to get the positionings varied in a way that looks pleasing for each individual cover. So thank you for going on this tour of the cover creation. I hope it was interesting. And if you haven't bought the book yet, please consider checking it out on Amazon, iBookstore, Nook Store, Kobo, or any other online reseller. Thank you.